These very early intros were done with 2 programs, because they were the only 2 programs I had access to at that time. And that was the drawing program CorelDRAW and the editing program / recording program Camtasia Studio. So in order to form this intro, I drew each and every frame. So this, I mean, we're talking the ancient, age-old frame-by-frame animations style, just not like enough frames, essentially, to make it really, really punchy. But what you have here is... Oh, it's going to be very difficult. You've got... Okay, we'll leave it there. This under bit was drawn in CorelDRAW as this sort of square block image. Then the blood splatter was drawn in CorelDRAW, and I think probably... Yeah, I'm assuming what I did was I probably exported it without the blood, then exported the image with the blood, and then did a fade in Camtasia. And likewise... Hang on, wait for it. Boom. Exported that frame out, and then added it to Camtasia. That frame, that's a frame, that's a frame, that's a frame, that's a frame. And then that's... I mean, obviously that last one is another frame, but I used a dip to white, maybe? ? Nowadays, I have no idea what is available in Camtasia. I haven't picked up Camtasia in quite some time, not since I sort of transferred over to the Adobe suite and made everything fundamentally better, I think, really. It is essentially better now. I know, technically, it's one of those ones where you can do decent things with limited tools. And I still use CorelDRAW a lot. I do mean a lot. It is a phenomenal vector graphic program. And most of the assets I build tend to start their life in CorelDRAW. Even if they are nowadays run through Photoshop for fancy textures and stuff, they tend to start life in CorelDRAW. I'll tell you one thing I was quite pleased at. Just, obviously, you know, it's nothing. It's you've curved it and moved it slightly. But the way it hugs the end there, I can't remember, it would be 007, wouldn't it? Yeah, so technically I would assume in the original 007 logo, that would be a straight line for the 7. And so what I did there was, quite pleasingly, just rounded it off slightly. Rounded it off ever so slightly, so it really did look like it belonged there. I've got to say, the animation technique, moderately poor. The actual overall design elements, I'm kind of pleased with. I can get behind that. Past me, well, thumbs up past me. I thought I was going to just hate them all, but no. The more I look at that, the more I really like that J-Dragon logo. Don't know what font that is, but I'm assuming I probably matched it as closely as possible to the 007 Bond font. There's not a lot else I can say about this one. It's, as I say, it was bare bones frame-by-frame animation, because that's all I was capable of back then, and we'll see that the exact same method in the Crusader animation. So we won't stop for Crusader too much, I don't think, because, as I say, again, you've got... That's probably some kind of cross-dissolve effect, but that's basically 2 frames. That's a 3rd frame. Wow. Genuinely? Me from the past. Was that genuinely 3 frames of effort? Because it's looking like 3 frames of effort. Because that's definitely 1 frame there. That's 2 frames there. And then that's 3 frames. Wow, I mean, back then you got what you paid for, didn't you? You got 3 frames of effort. I actually quite like the Crusader LP, but that intro... I know I said, like, James Bond suddenly started impressing me. This one is awful. It's fucking terrible, I've got to say. Past me, you really did not excel yourself with that one, did you? I can get behind that, because obviously it matches... Because I'm fairly certain that's a bit squished now, it looks like, but fundamentally that is the Earth font, which is the font from Crusader No Remorse. And that is roughly how I think it was written in the sort of game itself. So I'm quite pleased with the way I sort of then carried over the J-Dragon, but 3 frames is is shocking. Absolutely shocking, really. It's not good. It's not good. 3 frames and a couple of transitions is not an intro doth not make. But we'll gloss over it as, I don't know. It's one of those ones where over the years my effort level has fluctuated substantially, I think. But that one's particularly low, I fear. Even lower than the James Bond one. The James Bond one actually moderately impressive. At least this one slides into widescreen. I'm quite pleased that I made the transition into widescreen reasonably early there. I think it's probably better. It matches more the sort of bigger channels and stuff, which I'm pleased at. Should you be pleased at that? Yeah, I mean, you should probably deliver higher quality commentary at all times. Probably, but, widescreen is a good first step. Anyway, let's gloss over Crusader, because genuinely not impressive. Not an impressive one. The music as the official thing really carries that quite substantially. Now, this one was sort of, again, it's the same technique as James Bond and Crusader, except I decided to use in-game footage of me failing. But you can see that's a frame added. Nowadays, I think I'd want to put a lot more motion into that, like you saw with the intro to this whole intros thing. What I'd want is, I think... Oh, that's not starting again. It's just I did a lot of variants of Dragon's Half Hour. So yeah, what I'd want to do here, I think, is... guaranteed nowadays I'd use the Saber plugin. Because you use nothing else for your text nowadays. Probably pretty much. But I'd also probably want to put a bit of a wiggle on my head, as it were. A bit of a wiggle, maybe separate wiggles for each of them, or maybe just wiggling the entire frame, I don't know. I'd definitely go After Effects, fractal noise, evolution, so that there's at least a little bit of motion in the background. Just that blank blue gradient. I think it's a gradient. It looks to be a gradient. I usually use gradients, in fairness. Gradients do make it slightly more interesting than just a flat colour. He says, noticing that his entire face emblem is a flat colour, but hey, look, right, let's go back to something different. So I quite enjoyed this little concept. Let's start from the beginning of the concept of Dragon's Half Hour, because then that's going to explain a lot to do with how I built the intro, I think. So we'll just review it again. So I want to actually get to a key point to point this out, but it's quite fun watching me fail, I'm sure. If only that was true, I'd get a lot more viewers. In Dragon's Half Hour. So that I think was always quite confusing to a lot of people. Why would you put on dragons? Okay, so I've explained this to people in the past, I think, but for those of you unaware, this whole concept, I think the general idea was, I don't know, I'm just going to come out and say it was filler content. It was filler. The idea was, okay, this is, I don't know if they were ever actually half an hour. I kind of do hope that the first ever episode was half hour and then it slipped. But I've got a nasty feeling that I don't think any episode of Dragon's Half Hour was actually half an hour. And that almost, I tell you, towards the end, that almost became a running gag for me, just to make sure they were not half an hour whatsoever. Because it's just ridiculous that Dragon's Half Hour, how long's this? That's 2 hours. That's free. That one's an hour and a half. Where was the half hour? I mean, they come in increments of half hour, an hour and a half, 2 hours, 2.5 hours. But yeah, it became a bit of a gag to me to never, ever have another one that was ever actually half an hour. But anyway, the key fundamental here was there is a radio show that also was a TV show for a little bit as well. I am going to say 50s. I might be wrong. Might be earlier, it might be later. Yeah. Oh, brain, can you do it? Can you do it? Have you got it handy? Where'd you keep them? No, downstairs. Oh, you've given them a little bit of a secret. You've told them you're upstairs. Yes. And possibly later on I'll be in my lady's chamber. Upstairs, downstairs, in your lady's chamber. You're a fucking weird person. Yes, I am. So one other thing to note, let's just note this. So through J-Dragon as Bond and Crusader, you'll note that the head icon that I now use pretty rigidly at all times was not present. That's because it didn't exist prior to this. And this is another thing. Right, okay, let's try and get thoughts in order. It's rare that I do that, but try and get thoughts in order. There was a radio show, as I say, I'm going to say 1950s, because I think I'm going to be close if I say that. I will try and, I don't 100% plan on doing too much editing for this. It's meant to be fairly relaxed, informal, sort of chatty type back and forth. I say back and forth. It's me chatting to myself. You know that's a sign of madness, don't you? Yes. I need not be reminded of that. Thank you. Anyway, I'm going to say 1950s. I will try and correct myself on the screen should that prove necessary, or I will confirm it on screen should that prove to be the case. And it was a radio show called Hancock's Half Hour, starring Tony Hancock, Sidney James. Okay, right, do it properly. Okay, right.
BBC presents Tony Hancock with Moira Lister, Bill Kerr, and Sidney James in Hancock's Half Hour.
La 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 la. And Kenneth Williams was in it as well, for those interested in precisely who was in it. And Moira Lister, so the earliest ones, and I feel slightly guilty now. There was another person, another female lead in it, whose name I can't remember. You're a terrible human being. Yes, but I tell you one thing it's reminded me of. It's reminded me that I need to listen to those again. I almost said watch, but I do mean listen. I also do have the DVD collection of the TV episodes of Hancock's Half Hour. But anyway, obviously, being that I'm not in I would have to be, 50, 60, 70? I'd have to be 70 to have been born in the 50s, let alone to be listening to Hancock's Half Hour in the 50s. So I very much came about it from my mother. She introduced me to Hancock's Half Hour because she enjoyed it, but I'm not entirely convinced. I suppose she would have been. No, it's an intriguing thought because she wouldn't have been around to have heard it if it's 50s. If I'm right about it being 50s, she wouldn't have been of an age to listen to it originally either. So maybe it's Jesus. It could have been, depending on the exact timings. We'll find out the dates later on. We'll find out and discover what the dates were. But it may have been her parents told her to my mother, and my mother told her to me. And anyway, I think it's a hilarious radio show. Tony Hancock was incredible comic genius and had great comic timing for everything he did. And Sid James, I absolutely adored from the Carry On films, because that might be where it came from. Because I think I used to watch the Carry On films. Again, this one was definitely based on my mother's suggestion. She'd seen it. I think she saw Carry On Cowboy on TV one weekend. And she said, we should watch that. That'll be fun. I like Carry On films. I think you might as well. And it turns out, yes, I fucking do. The only thing I don't like about Carry On Cowboy is the fact that Sid James loses. And Sid James was my favourite actor for many, many years. And probably still is, in fairness. I find him hilarious. What was that? Did you just fucking choke on something? No, that was supposed to be Sid James's laugh. He's got quite the laugh, and in Hancock's Half Hour, he was always playing. In fairness, in Carry On films, he was often playing a swindler, and it was always funny to have him, figure out how he's swindling Hancock out of a wide array of money. And what are you doing? What are you doing? Don't be circling. I don't know why it was circling. Shouldn't be doing anything other than this, thank you, computer. So anyway, I fell in love with Hancock's Half Hour as a radio show and TV series, and I thought Hancock was hilarious. And still is, frankly. A lot of it, I grant you, some of it you can tell its age because they're sort of talking about pennies and halfpennies and stuff back, and that slightly dates it. But a lot of the general concepts are just sufficiently universal that you really don't note Like, what was it? The Sunday afternoon at home, where they've got nothing to do. Now, I grant you, nowadays we'd have a lot more because we've got computers and shit. But back then they didn't have all of that stuff. You had the wireless and the TV maybe, but that TV was brand new back when they were doing that. But nonetheless, it was this whole episode based on a lazy Sunday afternoon where they had nothing to do. And then there was an episode to do with a sleepless night where he's trying to get up early in the morning for his new radio show, but everything and anything was standing in his way to successfully get a good night's sleep. Which I think, again, that's a nice little theme that can be easily relatable today. So I think they do stand up. So if you're interested, do feel free to look up Hancock's Half Hour. It's a great little series I absolutely adore. But the fact that I adore it is what influenced this, because I believe it's a Hornberg hat, is a trademark. I suppose it might not be a trademark, but it's an icon of Hancock from the TV series. He would wear the Hornberg hat. So I decided, do you know what? If I'm going to go all out with this idea of doing we present J Dragon playing games in Dragon's Half Hour, I'll use some of the iconography that I like from Hancock, and that's where the hat came from. And it's kind of, I've kept it up throughout the years because I just quite like that image. I don't know. It is technically my face. I know it doesn't really look like a human face, and it's not. But what I did was I took a photo of my face, and then I drew round it in CorelDRAW. I only drew round half. It is a symmetrical mirror, but nonetheless, it is fundamentally, at least half of it is based on my real face, and that is my real beard. Most of the time. Depends on how lazy I've been in the whole trimming beard thing. So that's fun facts for you all round. But so anyway, the key thing is the intro to Hancock's Half Hour is this music. And then we present Tony Hancock, Moira Lister, Sid James, Bill Kerr, Kenneth Williams in Hancock's Half Hour. And I basically took one of the intros to the radio show and spliced in my own bits and bobs. And that was how Dragon's Half Hour was born. And that is why it was always, we present J Dragon 56 playing games in Dragon's Half Hour. Because originally it was Hancock's, which would naturally have the H. But if you tried Dragons, that just sounds weird. So I kept the traditional Dragon's Half Hour. And there you go, that's some fun facts for everybody.